Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a kitchen filled with avocado green appliances, macrame plant hangers swaying in the corner, and the faint hum of a vinyl record spinning in the background. The air is thick with the aroma of pot roast, casseroles, and Jell-O molds that wobble on the counter. This was the 1970s, an era where food was more than just sustenance. It was a reflection of changing times, shifting identities, and the curious collision of tradition and innovation. Yet so many of these meals, once staples of American families, have faded into obscurity. Forgotten recipes, dusty cookbooks, and nostalgic tastes now only live in the memories of those who gathered around those dining tables. But today, we are going to bring them back to life. Before we dive in, ask yourself this: how many meals from your childhood have you let slip away? How many flavors that once defined your weekends, your family gatherings, or your holidays have you never revisited? By remembering the forgotten meals of the 1970s, we don't just honor a decade, we reconnect with family traditions, cultural shifts, and the comfort of togetherness. So stay with me until the end of this journey, because by the time we're done, you'll want to cook, taste, and relive these dishes once more. The kitchen as the heart of the 1970s. The 1970s was not just another decade, it was a period of profound transformation for American households. Families were navigating an era of inflation, cultural change, and shifting roles within the family unit. Convenience began to creep into the kitchen in the form of instant mixes, frozen dinners, and fast food chains, but home cooking was still the soul of the American household. The weekend table remained sacred, often laden with hearty meals that blended tradition with modern experimentation. It was the decade of casseroles crowned with canned soup, of salads that combined fresh produce with curious ingredients, and of desserts so colorful and elaborate they looked like works of art. Food in the 1970s was also deeply social. Dinner wasn't just about eating, it was about gathering. Families, neighbors, and friends bonded over shared dishes. Potlucks became cultural rituals, cookbooks became bestsellers, and the kitchen was no longer just a private space but a stage for creativity, pride, and even status. To revisit the meals of this era is to step into the heartbeat of American culture, where taste was inseparable from memory and meaning. The rise of the casserole, a symbol of comfort and convenience. Few meals embody the 1970s as powerfully as the casserole. Whether it was tuna noodle casserole, green bean casserole, or endless variations mixing pasta, vegetables, and canned soup, casseroles were the champions of American kitchens. They were affordable, practical, and endlessly versatile, allowing families to stretch a dollar without sacrificing flavor. Mothers could prepare them ahead of time, bake them in avocado green or harvest gold dishes, and serve a crowd with minimal effort. But casseroles were more than food. They symbolized a cultural shift toward convenience. As more women joined the workforce, the demand for meals that were quick, filling, and family-friendly skyrocketed. Companies like Campbell's built entire advertising campaigns around recipes that turned their canned soups into indispensable kitchen staples. Church potlucks, community dinners, and family reunions all leaned on the trusty casserole, making it not just a dish but a social glue. The casserole was also a stage for experimentation. Families added potato chips for crunch, layered in unusual combinations of proteins and vegetables, or topped their creations with gooey cheese that stretched with every serving. It was hearty enough to please husbands returning from long workdays, yet creative enough to impress guests. In a decade defined by economic uncertainty and shifting family roles, the casserole offered reassurance that the table would always be full. Even though casseroles have not vanished entirely, the elaborate, creative versions of the 1970s, layered, cheesy, and sometimes a little outrageous, have largely disappeared from modern tables. Revisiting them today offers a glimpse into an era where resourcefulness and comfort combined to create meals that defined a generation, proving that food could be both practical and a reflection of cultural change. Meatloaf magic, reinventing a classic. Meatloaf wasn't born in the 1970s, but it thrived during the decade. The dish, often derided today as humble or plain, was a centerpiece of family dinners throughout the era. Ground beef was affordable and plentiful, and when mixed with breadcrumbs, onions, ketchup, and sometimes unusual add-ins like hard-boiled eggs or cheese, it stretched to feed entire households. The ketchup glaze on top became iconic, a glossy symbol of home-cooked love. Yet the 1970s also saw meatloaf reinvented in countless ways. Cookbooks offered recipes that added exotic seasonings, mushrooms, or even barbecue sauce. Variations like Italian-style meatloaf or spicy southwestern meatloaf reflected the decade's growing openness to new flavors. Families personalized it, experimenting with what they had in the pantry. For children, meatloaf meant predictability and comfort. For parents, it meant practicality and efficiency. Together, it became a ritual, baked in Pyrex dishes and served with mashed potatoes or peas on the side. But meatloaf was more than food, it was a weekly ceremony. Families gathered in kitchens where the smell of baking beef filled the air, the sound of foil being pulled back from the pan signaling dinner was ready. Leftovers often made their way into sandwiches, ensuring the meal stretched even further. Even TV sitcoms of the decade referenced meatloaf, reinforcing its cultural status as the great American dinner. Today, meatloaf may not be the glamorous dish of Instagram feeds, but in the 1970s it was the dependable anchor of weekend meals. To remember it is to remember the sound of an oven timer dinging, the smell of savory beef wafting through the house, and the feeling of gathering around a table that promised consistency in an uncertain world. Jell-O salad, a wobbly wonder. If there is one dish that screams 1970s nostalgia, it is the Jell-O salad. Vibrant, colorful, and often a little bizarre, Jell-O creations turned dessert into performance art. Molds filled with gelatin, canned fruit, marshmallows, and sometimes even vegetables became staples at family gatherings and holiday weekends. They shimmered under kitchen lights and made children giggle with delight as they wobbled on their plates. The Jell-O salad embodied the spirit of the decade, playful, experimental, and unafraid of pushing boundaries. Cookbooks of the era showcased elaborate layered molds that looked more like sculptures than desserts. Hostesses took pride in presenting them, often competing to outdo one another with intricate shapes or surprising flavor combinations. For children, it was pure joy. For adults, it was a symbol of creativity and resourcefulness. Part of the Jell-O craze was fueled by clever marketing campaigns that positioned gelatin as modern, futuristic, and endlessly versatile. Recipes featured in glossy magazines encouraged homemakers to embrace bold color combinations, creating centerpieces that doubled as conversation starters. Families experimented with savory versions too, adding olives, tuna, or cottage cheese, though not all experiments were successes. Still, these dishes reflected the daring energy of a country eager to try new things. Though modern palates may find some of the recipes unusual, lime Jell-O with shredded carrots, for instance, these salads were a snapshot of an era unafraid of culinary experimentation. They remain among the most memorable of the decade's forgotten meals, a reminder of when food could be both nourishment and entertainment, and when a wobbly dessert could bring joy to an entire room. The slow cooker revolution, pot roast and beyond. Another defining trend of the 1970s was the rise of the slow cooker, thanks to the introduction of the crock-pot. Suddenly, busy families had a way to prepare hearty meals that cooked themselves throughout the day. The most iconic of these was the pot roast, beef simmered slowly with onions, carrots, potatoes, and broth until it became fork tender. For many households, the aroma of pot roast filling the air on a Sunday afternoon was the essence of comfort. But the slow cooker was not limited to pot roast. Families experimented with stews, chili, chicken dishes, and even desserts. It became the emblem of a new way of cooking, blending convenience with tradition. While stovetop and oven cooking remained dominant, the crockpot offered freedom. Mothers could go to work, children could go to school, and dinner would still be waiting when they returned. The pot roast of the 1970s was not just about flavor, it was about lifestyle. It represented adaptation to a world where time was increasingly scarce but the ritual of family meals remained sacred. Its decline in popularity mirrors the decline of slow, communal eating in general. To revive it is to revive a sense of patience and anticipation that today's instant meals rarely deliver. TV dinners and the convenience craze. While home-cooked meals dominated weekends, the 1970s also witnessed the rise of convenience foods. The TV dinner, packaged neatly in aluminum trays, symbolized a cultural shift toward individualization and instant gratification. Families would gather around the television, each with their own tray of Salisbury steak, mashed potatoes, and corn, watching sitcoms or news broadcasts as they ate. Though these meals were more common during weekdays, weekends were not immune to their allure. For single parents, busy families, or those simply craving novelty, TV dinners offered a taste of modernity. They represented freedom from the kitchen, an embrace of technology, and a willingness to blend eating with entertainment. What made them especially appealing was the sense of novelty, the idea that dinner no longer had to involve hours of preparation or a crowded table. Critics may argue that TV dinners eroded family traditions, but in the 1970s they carried a sense of excitement. Children marveled at their neat compartments, parents appreciated the simplicity, and advertisers celebrated them as a futuristic solution to domestic life. The shiny trays, steaming under oven light, felt like miniature buffets crafted for each person. And while they may not have matched the flavor of homemade meals, they reflected a nation learning to balance tradition with convenience, where modern kitchens embraced both casseroles baked from scratch and dinners reheated in foil trays. Forgotten though they may be, they were an undeniable part of the era's culinary story and a reflection of how technology began reshaping the dinner table. Fondue nights, a social experience in a pot. The 1970s were not only about practicality in the kitchen, they were also about creating an atmosphere. Nothing captured the decade's love of social dining quite like fondue. A bubbling pot of melted cheese or chocolate, surrounded by long forks and platters of bread, fruit, or meat, turned eating into an interactive event. Families and friends gathered around the fondue pot, dipping and laughing, sharing stories as they cooked their own bites. Fondue was more than a meal. It was a lifestyle symbol, imported from Europe but embraced wholeheartedly in American homes. The fondue set became a popular wedding gift, and recipes filled cookbooks with endless variations, from Swiss-style cheese to decadent chocolate for dessert. It brought a touch of sophistication to gatherings, yet it remained fun and approachable. People loved the drama of lifting gooey strands of cheese or coating strawberries in glossy chocolate, and the ritual created a sense of intimacy that few other meals could replicate. While fondue still exists today, its heyday was undoubtedly the 1970s. For many families, a fondue night was the highlight of the weekend, a chance to blend tradition with novelty and turn a meal into a memory. It transformed eating into an experience, one where food became secondary to the laughter, the conversation, and the shared delight of cooking together at the table. Though it may no longer hold the same cultural prominence, fondue remains a delicious reminder of an era when meals were not just about sustenance but about celebration, connection, and the simple joy of togetherness. Deviled eggs and party platters. Number 1970s gathering was complete without a platter of deviled eggs. Hard-boiled eggs, halved and filled with creamy yolk mixtures seasoned with mustard, paprika, or relish, were a go-to appetizer. Their popularity lay in their simplicity, they were affordable, easy to make, and universally loved. Deviled eggs often appeared alongside cheese balls, cocktail sausages, and trays of celery sticks filled with peanut butter or cream cheese. These were the snacks of choice for parties, potlucks, and weekend get-togethers. They were the foods that children could grab without utensils and adults could prepare without stress. But beyond practicality, deviled eggs became a kind of social ritual. Hosts prided themselves on their unique spin, some added curry powder, others bacon bits, and a few even garnished with olives for flair. The familiar platter on a dining table or picnic bench instantly signaled comfort and tradition. Though deviled eggs remain known today, the 1970s gave them a kind of cultural dominance that has since waned. They were everywhere, from backyard barbecues to holiday spreads, representing a time when finger foods reigned supreme. To many, deviled eggs also symbolized the rise of communal eating, where small bites encouraged lingering conversations, laughter, and togetherness. Rediscovering them today is more than a nod to nostalgia, it's a reminder of how simple recipes can bring people together. Ambrosia salad, sweetness in a bowl. Another unforgettable dish of the 1970s was ambrosia salad. Combining canned fruit cocktail, mini marshmallows, coconut, and whipped cream, this sweet concoction blurred the line between salad and dessert. Its pastel colors and fluffy texture made it a favorite for Easter dinners, Sunday brunches, and family picnics. Ambrosia salad reflected the decade's fascination with convenience. It required little preparation, relied heavily on canned goods, and offered a sweet, cheerful presence at the table. Children adored it, while adults appreciated its simplicity. For many, ambrosia salad was more than food, it was a tradition tied to specific holidays and gatherings. Families often passed down their own variations, some adding sour cream for tang, others tossing in cherries or pineapple to brighten the mix. It was light, playful, and indulgent without being fussy. Today, ambrosia salad is often dismissed as outdated or overly sweet, but to the families of the 1970s, it was a beloved treat, a reminder that joy could come in the simplest forms. It embodied the era's belief that food could be both fun and comforting, bridging the gap between dessert and side dish. Remembering ambrosia is to remember brightly set tables, laughter-filled kitchens, and a time when recipes were built as much on tradition as they were on imagination. Macaroni bakes and pasta surprises. Pasta dishes took on new life in the 1970s, especially in the form of macaroni bakes. Elbow macaroni, mixed with cheese, ground beef, or tomato sauce, was baked into bubbling casseroles that fed entire families. Some versions were topped with breadcrumbs for crunch, while others leaned heavily on melted cheese for indulgence. Spaghetti also became a staple, often served with meatballs or baked into layered casseroles. These pasta dishes represented the decade's blending of immigrant traditions with American practicality. Italian-American cuisine had gone mainstream, and weekend tables reflected that cultural shift. Magazines featured easy pasta bake recipes, while cookbooks encouraged homemakers to experiment with sauces, cheeses, and spices. Families welcomed these dishes not just for their flavor but for their flexibility. They could be dressed up for company or kept simple for weeknight dinners. Macaroni bakes, while simple, were deeply satisfying. They carried the warmth of family kitchens and the reliability of dishes that could stretch ingredients and still taste delicious. Forgotten by some, they remain one of the most comforting memories of the decade. For children, the golden crust of cheese was irresistible. For parents, the affordability and ease were unmatched. Revisiting them today is to step back into a kitchen filled with the aroma of bubbling sauce, the laughter of family nearby, and the assurance that some meals, no matter how humble, can feel like a feast. Weekend breakfasts, pancakes, quiche, and cereal galore. The 1970s weekend was not just about dinner, it was also about breakfast. Pancakes and waffles, often topped with margarine and maple syrup, were weekend staples. Families gathered around the griddle, flipping stacks of golden pancakes and enjoying the slow pace of Saturday mornings. For many households, the smell of batter sizzling on a cast iron pan was the scent of comfort itself. Parents took pride in piling plates high with pancakes, sometimes adding blueberries or chocolate chips for a touch of fun. Waffles, too, made their mark, crispy on the outside, soft inside, and perfect for catching every drop of syrup in their square pockets. Quiche also gained popularity, especially among households embracing a more European influence. Filled with eggs, cheese, spinach, or ham, quiche was considered both elegant and versatile, a dish that could serve as breakfast, brunch, or even dinner. Magazines and cookbooks praised quiche as a sophisticated yet practical option, something that could be whipped up with whatever was left in the fridge. It represented the decade's willingness to experiment, to borrow from international cuisine while keeping things family-friendly. And of course, no mention of 1970s breakfasts would be complete without cereal. This was the golden age of sugary cereals marketed to children, from Frosted Flakes to Lucky Charms. Weekend mornings meant cartoon marathons on television, bowls of colorful cereal, and the pure joy of childhood freedom. The jingles from TV ads became ingrained in memory, and children often begged their parents to buy whichever cereal had the most exciting toy inside the box. For adults, cereal was a quick and easy solution, but for kids, it was magic in a bowl, sweet, crunchy, and tied forever to the carefree mornings of youth. Breakfast in the 1970s wasn't just a meal, it was a ritual, one that blended tradition, novelty, and joy in equal measure. Holiday feasts, turkey, ham, and beyond. While everyday meals leaned toward convenience and creativity, the holidays of the 1970s were steeped in tradition. Thanksgiving turkeys roasted slowly in ovens, Christmas hams glazed with pineapple and cloves, and Easter lambs served with mint jelly carried on practices passed down through generations. Kitchens filled with the aroma of roasting meat and baking pies, while families eagerly anticipated the grand reveal of the holiday table. What made holiday meals in the 1970s unique was the blending of old and new. Alongside the traditional roasts and pies, families often served casseroles, Jell-O molds, and ambrosia salads. Green bean casseroles topped with crispy onions, sweet potato dishes with marshmallows, and layered gelatin desserts were just as central as the main course. These additions reflected the era's love for convenience and experimentation, as store-bought shortcuts met homemade traditions in one harmonious spread. Holiday cookbooks encouraged creativity, suggesting ways to make dishes festive, colorful, and easy to prepare for large groups. These meals were about more than food. They were about gathering everyone, grandparents, cousins, siblings, around one table, creating memories that lasted for decades. Children often sat at their own smaller tables, giggling and sneaking bites of dessert early, while adults toasted with wine or eggnog. The clatter of silverware, the laughter of relatives catching up, and the joy of seeing an entire family reunited turned these meals into lasting emotional touchstones. Though some of the dishes have faded from modern celebrations, the spirit of those 1970s holiday feasts remains timeless. They remind us that food is never just sustenance, it is connection, tradition, and love served on a platter. Rediscovering the flavors of yesterday. As we look back at the forgotten meals of the 1970s, we uncover more than recipes. We rediscover the stories of families who gathered every weekend, the laughter that echoed around fondue pots, the pride poured into casseroles, and the joy found in something as simple as a Jell-O mold. These meals, though often overlooked today, were the heartbeat of American households. They reflected resilience, creativity, and togetherness during a decade of change. To remember them is to remember the importance of family meals, not just as nourishment, but as rituals that shaped who we are. In an age of fast food and instant gratification, perhaps there is something valuable in returning to these forgotten traditions, in slowing down to cook, share, and savor. Bring the past back to the table. Now it's your turn. Dig out those old family cookbooks, call your parents or grandparents for recipes, and try recreating one of these forgotten meals. Host a fondue night, whip up an ambrosia salad, or bake a classic meatloaf. Don't let these dishes remain in the past, bring them to life again in your own kitchen. Share them with your family, your friends, and maybe even pass them down to the next generation. Because food is more than flavor, it's memory, tradition, and the glue that binds us together.